Okay, so we're going to be reading the final chapters 14 through 17 of part 1 tonight. And I want to just offer a little bit of like overview context of our study. So we're about to be a third of the way through the material. And BJ was reflecting to me earlier today that she thought it might be nice for us to take a pause in our study flow and just do some review. And I definitely am open to that, but my sense is it'll be fruitful for us to just continue to try to like read the material and take as much of it in as we can. And there's concepts that are being introduced now that haven't been unpacked yet. So if we stop and try to like understand the material before we've gone further and actually gotten the full description of some of these concepts that have been introduced but have not yet been fully explored, I'm not sure we'll get as much out of our review time. So that was my response to BJ. I just want to share that here in this context. It's my intention that we'll just keep going. So next week we'll read the beginning few chapters of part 2 of the book. And then once we get maybe through the end of part 2, maybe then we'll either spend a week or two doing some review. I'm very open to doing whatever we need to do to make sure that everyone's getting what they want out of it. And that's my perspective, is I want to continue on and just do our best to get what we can get, and we'll review later. BJ?
And one thing that was also helpful to me was you specifically said, you think it will start to make more sense. Like there's pieces that he hasn't revealed yet that are coming to light.
Yeah. For example, one of Jim's questions was, in chapter 1, Walter Russell describes these 2 electric lights that God uses to express, its idea, or something like that. And Jim's like, what are these electric lights? And it's like, well, he hasn't actually defined them yet. He hasn't actually unpacked that concept yet. And I think we will get into that in part 2, but especially in part 3. And it's something that he's already referencing. And it's not the only concept that he's referencing, but he hasn't yet fully defined. So one of the things that I've found to be pretty consistent in Walter Russell's teaching is what he says is, and this is a bit of a challenge, but what he says is, once you finish this work, go back and read it again. He says it about a few of his books, and he definitely says it about the home study course that he put together with his wife, Lau. So, so it's a massive paradigm shift. This is, in my opinion, this material is the seed of, 4th density and higher science. So, it's a bit of a stretch beyond what we tend to be conditioned to understand the reality to be. So it takes some time to, acclimate to it and really start to deepen into it. And a lot of us are already very primed. And a lot of us, I think, really actually have a lot of purchase on this material, but it's a different angle than Ra's words and Ra's clothing of the concepts. So it doesn't always click right away. And I think that's what's going on for Jim is, it's not the same language that he's used to, but I think he obviously fully understands all these concepts, is my guess, but the language is different. And so that's going to be our experience as well. So let's just do our best. And when it gets a little further on, then we'll pause and review. And in the meantime, let's just lean into each other through the forum and through the office hours and ask questions as we need to stay connected to where we're at. Cool. Alrighty, chapter 14, motion simulating rest. How about I read this one? Oh, and I think we'll go ahead and read all the way through and then discuss with whatever time we have left, if that works for you guys. Let's try it out this week and see how that goes. I know, and it'll be a lot, but it'll clarify. It'll just make very clear how much time we have for discussion without having to rush at the end to finish the reading. So let's try it and see how it goes. Okay. Sound good? Great. Thanks, y'all. Okay, chapter 14, motion simulating rest. This electric universe of motion forever moves to find rest, but never finds it. Matter in violent motion simulates rest and balance through violent motion. The more violent the motion, the greater is the illusion of rest and balance. Motion can cease, but it can never become rest. This make-believe universe, the entire dynamic wave universe of electric matter, is not what it seems to be. Everything which seems at rest depends upon violent motion to make believe it is at rest. A wire wheel could appear to be a steel disc if spun fast enough. The faster it is spun, the more at rest it would seem. This planet, seemingly at rest, is in violent motion around its centering point of rest, from which it is electrically extended. Seemingly motionless clouds floating above the Earth are rotating with it at the tremendous speed of 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, or 4 times faster than a plane. All the planets are revolving swiftly around their central sun, which seemingly stands still in the heavens of space, but in fact is moving with incredible speed. Likewise, all the stars of night, simulating rest, are moving at terrific speeds to adjust their mutual unbalances in this dual universe of divided pressure. The pencil in one's hand, the desk upon which one is writing, the room full of motionless things seeming to be at rest, are but simulating rest through violent motion of their many parts. Tremendous vibrations may be in that glass paperweight. Not one thing could manifest the rest it simulates if it were not for the incredible speeds of those atoms which so incessantly rotate and revolve to make that seeming restfulness possible. Even still things are not still. All seemingly still matter is manifesting make-believe rest by make-believe motion. Motion itself is an illusion. The motion one senses in one's brain has no more reality than the motion which one senses in a motion picture. The seeming motion of the cinema is caused by sequences of changing patterned forms projected on the screen, which give the impression of motion because of the rapid change of pattern in the negatives. That self-same illusion applies to the material universe. Are we good to continue? Does anyone have any burning questions to ask now, or should we keep going?
I really want to make a comment, but maybe everybody wants to make a comment, and then that would.
I think it's okay,
not
BJ.
have us
I think it's a
continue.
lot to, it really is a lot to read 4 chapters and then
Yeah.
hold everything to the end. So go ahead.
So just my brief comment is most of the chapter, he's like, nothing is still, everything's moving. But then the last part, he's like, nothing's moving, everything's still. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Kent?
Yeah, so in the second to last paragraph, it says motion itself is an illusion. But then in the earlier part, he says rest is simulated by violent motion. So it seems contradictory.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It does seem contradictory. And
Paradoxical.
yep,
Paradoxical.
paradoxical. And I think what I want to offer relative to that paradox and that contradiction is to keep in mind the frames, the two frames that we're able to view reality through. There's the frame of our relative experience of third density, of seeming separation, of seeming to be a separate person, viewing the 10,000 things of reality. That's a very convincing frame, and it's obviously very intimate and personal, and we're familiar with it. And then there's the mystical frame that's undistorted, that posits that all is one, and that in fact, there is unity to the illusion of separation. And so there's the frame of the absolute truth, and there's the frame of the relative truth. And as we go through the material, Walter Russell's kind of toggling back and forth between the two. And it's not always obvious, you know, when or how that's happening, but I would just offer that as a way to like, oh, okay, maybe the contradiction is because we're shifting frames, and from one frame, there is no motion. But from another frame, well, of course there's motion. We experience it all the time.
I agree a lot with what you just said about that. It seems like he toggles between one place and another. And I really get the feeling that a lot of his transmissions are coming from different stages of insight. Something that repeatedly came up for me reading these 4 chapters, was the difference of perception between time, space, and space time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And from one, in space time, everything's moving and time seems to be occurring and we seem to be moving along the wheel. But in time space, we're the wheel. That's the unmoving wheel. And everything's happening at once. So that's kind of what I kept repeatedly popping in my head. Maybe because I like to put Ra's clothes on everything, but that just kept coming up during this particular section of the book.
That is an excellent, I really appreciate that comment. And that is also my experience. If I'm able to like compare and contrast Ra's teaching on time, space, and space-time, and Walter Russell's teaching on the idea, and the one, the sort of one whole idea of God, and then the illusory manifestation of that idea, that helps me also make a distinction between which realm are we describing here. And I will also say that Walter Russell's descriptions of how that all works has actually given me I feel like it's given me a deeper understanding of Ra's concepts of time, space, and space-time, because they're not always simple to understand them. And I feel a little bit more able to understand them because I've been studying this work. So hopefully that is something we will all experience too. Okay, who would like to read chapter 15?
I'll read. 15, the illusion of change. Change is an illusion of the senses due to motion. There is no change whatsoever in the conscious universe of knowing. There is only an illusion of change set up by the two interchanging lights of thinking to divide the one whole idea into many separate ideas and record them into moving matter. The senses are the audience for these thought pulsations. The senses are a part of this illusion. Senses are electric. They belong to the thought universe of motion and do not respond to stillness. As motion itself is non-existent, so also are senses non-existent. The senses are but the imagined records of imagined motion, matter, and change. As such, they are limited to pinhole peaks into the vastness, which extends beyond their sensing. The senses have no knowledge of what they sense. They merely record motion. The senses respond to motion in only one direction. They sense the forward flow of time, but not its backward flow. If they could register both directions, they would become aware of the stillness of this zero universe of seeming motion. The universal one planned it this way. Otherwise, there would be no sequential manifestation of thought which constitutes the creating universe. When our knowing exceeds our sensing, we will no longer be deceived by the illusions of our senses. A man seeing a technical or motion picture for the first time and without knowledge of such electric effects would think he were looking through a window at real happenings, unaware that it was but an illusion created by projecting positive light through patterned negatives. That is all that creation is, two lights projected through each other to simulate motion, form, and change. Our senses are like passengers on a fast-moving train. They sense parts of the landscape as they rush forward, while to their senses, the landscape rushes backwards. The senses interpret these effects as matter in fast motion, which is forever fast changing. A man seeing the same train from a mountain would sense that same fast motion and fast change as changeless and still. As man unfolds from sensed man to spiritual man, he gradually becomes aware of the two-way motion of all effect. That two ways being the visible effect, which responds to his senses, and the invisible effect, which he knows but does not sense. Gradually, the time arrives in his unfolding when his full awareness of cause voids all reliance upon sensation. He then rises above his sensing. He then knows the universe of motion for what it is instead of for what it seems to be.
This is another one of those, chapters where you could read this and be like, what is he even talking about? And again, I think that this is a mystical teaching. This is a mystical download. If you read the accounts of mystics, both, contemporary and in the past, everything he's talking about is congruent with what they say. It kind of breaks the logic of the conventional frame that we tend to, view reality through, but he's he's conveying a mystical message. So
yeah, this chapter really speaks to me, and it just feels so much like the work that I do with clients and that we do in the inquiring together, like being able to just simply be with a thought, be without the thought, and like through being with a thought and then without it, it reveals so much about the seeming and what seems to be happening with the thought, and then without it, like, oh, it's completely different, and I can be with the stillness. It's just like, that one sentence on page 79, when our knowing exceeds our sensing, we will no longer be deceived by the illusions of our senses. Like just a deeper knowing that's beyond the thinking mind and the illusory senses. It just makes so much sense to me.
Right. That's like our leveling up to 4D right there. Like that's starting that. It's like on the edge of that process.
Yep, totally.
I just want to thank BJ for the way you read. You were pausing after each sentence. That really helped me to follow along and gave me a little time to reflect after each sentence. It was really good.
So good. You're welcome. It helps me too.
Yeah.
Like absorb one thing,
Mm-hmm.
move to the next thing. Cool.
Right.
Can I share another thought?
Sure.
Okay. Page 78. There was this sentence, as such, they are limited to pinhole peaks into the vastness which extends beyond their sensing. And that reminded me of this neat story about this woman named Analia Benz. Super fascinating. Aaron and I were both into her, like, I don't know, more than a decade ago. She's, I don't follow her anymore, but what she says was, in this incarnation, it was her first time ever in a body. And her experience was she didn't use her eyes when she was young. She just sensed everything. And as she was learning to walk, she would trip over things because she wasn't necessarily watching where she was going. She was just watching everything. And then one time when she was little, her mom didn't know that she was having this experience. She said, use your eyes or something like that, like just a thing that a mom would say when the child trips. And then from that moment, she started to use her eyes. She did what mom said to do. And she described it as like it was seeing through tiny pinholes. Like she used to have all this vision, then all of a sudden she had these tiny pinholes. It just really reminded me of that. Like, oh gosh. And how much do we actually limit our sensing because we try to use our eyes?
Yeah, totally.
Well, and a little piece, I'm going to consider the synchronistic and meant to be shared because this has popped up for me more than once this week. There was a share in Benjamin's book where he said because he's also a visual learner and a visual person, and I am too, and I get really visual internally as well. And he said his teacher once told him, if you're seeing it, you're not feeling it. And that's popped up for me more than once this weekend. That makes me feel like I need to kind of like close down the pinholes even more, because I'm seeing visually so much that I'm not, if you're seeing it, you're not feeling it. And I'm personally switching gears into more the sensing and the feeling than the seeing. And that may not sound like it's that profound, but that's pretty huge for me right now as a intuitive knowing of something I need to do and switching gears, and also what that's allowing as far as the sensing comes up when I'm not seeing it. I am feeling it, and I am allowing that intuitive portion to come up. And also when closing the visual down in my mind, even I've started meditating like the Buddha statues with the eyes just a slit, because I'm getting so distracted in the visuals while I'm meditating that I'm like, this is too much visual, even with my eyes closed, that I'm having to like open them and stare at my legs just a smidge, just to keep me grounded in my body. So that's become a whole, discussing the senses and when we evolve out of the senses. So for me, it's starting with switching senses and then tapering them down to getting to that finite point of connection with Creator.
Nice. That's great practice. I'm with you on that. The challenge of being able to be in a meditative state and also, be with sensations and being able to toggle. But from what I understand, that's one of the reasons of meditative practice, is that we take time away from our lives to deepen into meditation, so that when we go back into our lives, we're able to bring more of that spiritual connection or the way of being that is meditative into our lives, and have more of a simultaneous experience of those things. And it's a practice for sure. My experience. Thanks, Nia. Okay, let's read the next chapter. Chapter 16. Anyone feel open to it? Kent.
All right. Oops, my phone keeps falling. I'm going to switch to, I turned off the Wi-Fi. I'm going to use the cell phone tower because the Wi-Fi seems to be cutting in and out. Okay, chapter 16, the senses deceive. Imagine a perfectly motionless wheel and a fly walking around its rim, moving ever forward over changing ground, and the wheel seemingly moving backward during a continuity of time in which the fly sensed a constant change in the changeless wheel. Every time the fly got back to the same point, it would compute the past time consumed on the journey and the forward time necessary for the next circuit. The wheel being still, motion, change, and time are created by the fly itself, as it takes the whole idea of the wheel apart by journeying around it and examining it bit by bit. The fly sensed motion by changing its position on the wheel. It sensed change by finding a seeming difference of condition at each forward movement. It sensed time by creating the sequences necessary in taking the one idea of the wheel apart and dividing it into many separate ideas. This simple analogy is a good symbol of creation. This planet, like the fly on the wheel, moves forever around its motionless orbit. The orbit is as rigid and still as the wheel upon which the fly is moving. As a planet moves upon the wheel of its orbit, it senses constant motion and change. It senses changes of days into nights, of spring merging into summer, autumn into winter. All of these seeming changes are in the motion of the planet and not in the wheel of its orbit. Each change is entirely due to the motion of the planet and not to the changeless orbit. The planet itself registers change on its changeless wheel. Change, therefore, lies in motion alone. The senses are motion, therefore the senses sense only that which they themselves are. Inadequacy of the senses. Man overrates his senses. He places too much dependence upon them without justification, for they are not recording all of the phenomena of his surroundings. He likewise trusts them too much without justification, for they are constantly deceiving him. While his senses are recording the stillness and rest of nature on a lazy afternoon, they are failing to record the violent motion of everything in his entire environment, from the blade of grass to the clouds in the heavens above him. Those seemingly motionless clouds are moving at the speed of 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, without the slightest evidence of that swift motion being recorded upon his senses. The Earth also is moving many miles per second in two directions, one of rotation upon its axis and the other of revolution around its orbit. His senses register stillness. They are electrically unaware of that motion. This deception is as it should be, just as the same deception in a cinema is as it should be. God's universe is but an electric recording of his knowing, manifested by his thinking. To thus record the idea of his knowing in the two lights of his thinking, a three-dimensional universe is necessary. If the senses could detect and record all motion, instead of but a part of it, the illusion would disappear. The senses would see behind the illusion and find that all motion voids itself. Division of the whole into parts causes the illusion. If the film were removed from the projector of the motion picture, the illusion of motion and change would be voided. That is what creation is, the one light of knowing divided into the patterned parts of thinking. Sensing is but an electric tension set up by the seeming division of one into many, which strain to fulfill their desire for oneness. When a unity of condition is consummated, sensation between those parts ceases because the tension ceases. The senses, being but tension of desire for unity between divided parts, have no existence. The senses are electric flux threads of light connecting every particle in the universe with every other particle. They are the intercommunicating nerves of the one universal body. When a strain of desire for balance, rest, or unity ceases, sensation ceases. In this electric universe, sensation is the strain of resistance to the separation which exists between all separated masses. All matter is one. Separated particles desire to find that oneness. It is part of God's plan that the senses are limited entirely to the recording of a very small fraction of effect. The senses can never sense the whole, but the conscious mind can know the whole.
It's great. Thank you, Kent.
Mhm.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Okay, it's part of God's plan that the senses are limited entirely to the recording of a very small fraction of effect. What that connects to me to from Ra's teaching, even though it's different words, but that just sounds like the veil. It's part of the plan that we don't see the interconnectedness. It's part of the evolution, which I think he refers to also what, Walter Russell refers to, that, especially in the next chapter, I think. Yeah. Then at the end of the next chapter, he says, man's whole reason for being is to gradually pass through the illusion of sensing into knowing. Anyway, that just feels really connected to me.
Mm-hmm.
The purposefulness of sensing being limited and sensing creating the illusion.
Yep. If what you're saying, well, okay. So just looking at that sentence, it is part of God's plan that the senses are limited entirely to the recording of a very small fraction of effect. So if what you're saying is true, BJ, and that actually is referring to a veiled condition, well, that is not a universal condition, right? Like there were creations before the veil. So this is very speculative. But when I hear Walter Russell's report of his conversation with God, I'm just like, who's God? Like, who's talking to you? Like, the one infinite creator doesn't talk. It's not manifest. And I have had the instinct that he's talking about the logos. And I don't know if logoi can have conversations with mind, body, spirit complexes. I don't know. But I think he might have had a powwow with the logos, like with our solar logos. And if that's the case, it is part of our sublogos's plan that the senses are limited, because it is part of our sublogos's plan to have a veil. So anyway, we're getting into like deeper territory, and obviously we're not here to like completely unpack the law of one, but I just wanted to put that in there because I'm so curious about who this God character is that he talks about. Diana?
I think it's so cute how much we geek out, and yeah.
Yeah, Diana.
BJ, when you said that about the veil, my wheels started turning. Because I know that Ross says that time-space is as complex a system of illusions as space-time. And I know that once we proceed into like fourth density and the veil lifts, per Ra, we still have this notion of being ourself. And somehow we can inhabit that perspective. And then also we can inhabit the perspective of the social memory complex, but like all the way up to seventh density, there's differentiation, there's identity, there's that thing that Ross says we're doing where we're dancing through the illusion by distorting thought, right? Like, so I also wonder.
We amuse ourselves.
Yeah, we amuse ourselves. Like, it's not necessary. So I also wonder if what Walter Russell is referring to proceeds through all beyond the veil, through all the densities, so that any entity can have experience. Because somehow we perceive ourselves to be evolving. Even once the concept of time is lifted away, there's this idea that we have work to do and things we desire to do somehow. And I'm just curious whether like the entire universe through all the densities maintains this illusion that Walter Russell is talking about, that is like free will. Basically, that's all I got.
Mm-hmm. I want to say something in reply to that. Oh, but Kent, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say many of the sentences here reminded me of the purpose of meditation. For example, the very last sentence, the senses can never sense the whole, but the conscious mind can know the whole.
Mm-hmm.
That reminded me of why we meditate. And I think there were other sentences in there too that reminded me of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I wanted to ask, did I break up when I was reading? Because sometimes you people break up when I'm, no, okay.
Oh, we
It all
heard you
came
nice.
through.
I think it did help when you disconnected from the Wi-Fi.
Okay, very
Yep.
good. All right. That's it.
Yeah, I really agree with that,
And
Kent.
great reading.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to riff off of that and share this idea. I don't know if I've shared this before. And okay, so just take it with a grain of salt because I might be oversimplifying. But here's the map that I'm working with, the 3 levels of the mind, body, spirit complex. In this system of Walter Russell, Spirit is the realm of knowing. It's the realm of wholeness. It's where we connect to like the undivided idea, the whole idea. Mind is where the idea gets taken apart by thinking. Body is where the electric manifestation of the thoughts get recorded in the universe as matter, as form. And again, I might be oversimplifying it, but that's been a helpful kind of like little secret decoder ring of when we talk about sensation, we're talking about body complex experience. When we talk about thinking, we're talking about mental, the mind complex experience. And we're talking about knowing, we're talking about the realm of spirit. We know through our connection with God. We know, we can know stillness, we can know wholeness, we can know oneness to the degree that we can reach all the way back down meditatively through the roots of the tree of mind back to where it connects to the spirit complex and to wholeness and to God. So to whatever degree that's useful to you all as we go through this, it's been super useful to me to connect that triad that Ra teaches about to help kind of orient myself to what Walter Russell is talking about. So you can try that on and see if it works for you. Yeah, Nia?
I like it. And I can't get over this sentence, and that almost somewhat ties into this. They're the intercommunicating nerves of the one universal body. When strain of desire for balance, rest, or unity ceases, sensation ceases. In this electric universe, sensation is a strain of resistance to the separation which exists between all separated masses. And then he's flipping back to all matter is one. Separated particles desire to find that oneness, like that. I don't know why I'm geeking out on that. We're the intercommunicating nerves of the one universal body. Like that just ties back into the purpose for the senses, and maybe tying into the veil of the veil of forgetfulness. Maybe that kind of, I don't know if those threads connect, but it feels like they're at least in the same fabric, if not really closely threaded together there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Diana?
I'm toggling between two ideas here, and maybe I shouldn't because I haven't been doing my homework. But going with the idea that, okay, could it be possible that as we begin to pierce the veil, I think this is possible, we discover that we have more senses than the 5 that we think we have right now. And so it would be possible to sense in any body complex, not just a veiled third density body complex.
This is a question you're asking?
Yeah, like, and I'm gonna leave it there for now. I'm
Mhm.
just,
I'm going to add a question to your question because this is where I'm struggling with. So Walter Russell talks about how, in the past earlier chapters, he talks about the distinction between sensing and thinking, and how, how we tend to sometimes mistake sensing for thinking. We think we're thinking, but in fact, we're just sensing. And how especially memory is just the record of sensing. So I've been looking at that in my own inner world. And I have a model that we have sort of etheric senses to match our 5 physical senses. So I can in the inner plane without there being a lemon, I can taste a lemon just by like bringing it to mind. I can taste a lemon. And the same with all the rest of the senses. I can have the experience of sensing without there being a physical analog to what I'm sensing. But then I'm like, well, is that always then just the memories I have of lemon? Is that just the brain? And then what is true? What is the distinction then in my inner vision and all of our inner vision? Like, what's the distinction between just record of sensing and creative thought? I mean, in some cases it's super obvious, but I've really been trying to like tease apart that line between what is just stored sensing that we sometimes mistake for thinking or thought, and what is actually genuine, authentic, creative thought that's a part of, God's whole idea. So anyway, it's a question. I don't have an answer, but I'm just curious about that. Okay, we've got some hands up. I wasn't tracking who went first, but I got BJ, you're first on my queue. So BJ and then Nia.
I think they usually pop up in order.
Okay, great.
Like when you put your hand up, it puts you at the top.
Cool.
Yeah. One of the thoughts that I have about the question that Diana was raising about, like, do we possibly have more senses than we know? And I think for sure we have more senses than we know. And also I think the distinction between our senses is not as clear as we think that it is. And that's actually one of the sort of illusions that, like, we divide sensing into, like, that's hearing, that's tasting, that's smelling, that's whatever those are, and we like create these like boxes, when really it's all just the knowing of our experience. And I think the more that we get in touch with the undivided knowing of our experience, that knowing expands. So that's just what that brought up for me.
Cool. Nia?
That's perfect, because science knows that memories are based on your emotions. Your actual recorded memories change based on your level of happiness. So we will remember things differently based on our level of stress in a moment, or based on the level of happiness in a moment of when the memory was being recorded, and when we're trying to recall the memory. So throw that into the mix of thinking that we're just recording the five senses and we have filed them away, and it's that simple, but it's not. Pulling those files forward, whatever was filed away has to do with what you are feeling at what your specifically your emotion, not what you're feeling in the feeling sense, but where your emotion was when you filed it, and when your emotion is when you pull it forward. So that really throws what BJ just said into validity as well. And on a side note, that kind of pulls forward exactly what that's been coming forward for me this week, especially really strongly, is the desire to close down my visual sense, because it's almost just, even with my eyes closed, it's just overriding what I'm feeling are, for lack of a better term, spiritual sensing, intuition, and being connected to all, and then even feeling the subtle energy body within the body, and then bringing that back into what's being put forward. So that kind of, to me, those all get mixed together, and it's not as easy to mentally, rationally pick it apart, which is what our third density brains want to do. I really wanted BJ to hear that, because that just stirs the pot. Oh, you did? Okay, good. Because I was like, yes, that was perfect. What you pulled that up, right? Like both of us raised our hand, and that was what was pinging heavily there. And I'm like, I want to mentally pick at that some more, and then at the same time, I'm like, I just want to stir the pot and let it all mix up and jive and stop rationalizing it at the same time. I'm working so hard to just like put 20 something years worth of rationally picking at every little piece of metaphysics and have it make sense scientifically, like this book. And now I'm so on the other side of this right now. It's just, I'm self-amused with my own evolution in that regard.
Yeah.
That's good work.
Yeah. And I think what you all are pointing to, really does make me think I'm oversimplifying when I try to like break it down into the 3 levels of, of how we experience reality, mind, body, and spirit, because, well, we also know that we have 7 bodies simultaneously nested. Like there's the 7 bodies of the 7, chakras. It's like, well, wouldn't those bodies each have its own sort of mode of experiencing? It's like, okay, well, already we're past 3 then. And, I kind of tend to think that when we go down, to orange and red, we sort of go back into the realm of like our cells, and then matter itself. And it's like, it makes me think of like, wow, each of our cells senses, like complex senses. Each cell is like having complex chemical reactions with all the cells around it that produce sensation. Those cells are experiencing sensation, but we don't register that. Like there's so much information that we're swimming through, and so little of that information is able to be processed by our conscious mind in this body, in this vehicle, in the yellow ray mind body spirit complex. But you could go both directions. You could go up into the higher bodies and imagine how those bodies sense and what information is available to them. And it's just like, wait a second, maybe I'm oversimplifying the mind body spirit. But anyway, we do our best.
I find a lot of overlap too, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let us read the last chapter in part 1, chapter 17. Anybody who has not read, would you like to read?
I'll read. I waited till the shortest chapter because my throat is on fire. But I finally have a physical book so I can contribute. Oh, and of course, my son wants food, so maybe I should skip it. You say hi.
Hi, Victor.
Hi.
Hi, buddy. I can read if you tell me what page I'm on, and I'll just
89.
move away from these Brussels sprouts for a minute.
Oh man, I'm driving out on Brussels sprouts this week. I'm totally addicted.
I also don't mind reading if you want to keep going with your Brussels sprouts.
No, thank you. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna kneel down though. Okay.
Just a side note too, I think we're such a small group and I don't really notice background noise. So I've been wondering, like, I think we could stay unmuted for the most part because it kind of it could potentially like create more flow in conversation. Just a thought.
Okay.
And then I muted myself, but because Diana's gonna read, I don't need to say anything.
That is a sweet thought, BJ. I'm noticing the closer connection too.
Man's new cycle. This coming age will mark an epical advancement in man's evolution toward his goal of omniscience and omnipotence. Man becomes a higher being with greater power as he acquires knowledge. In knowledge alone lies power. Only through knowledge can man become co-creator with God. Knowledge can be obtained by man only through awareness of the spirit within him. Lack of that awareness is the tragedy of today's civilization. During the last century of the greatest scientific progress in the history of man, great nations of the world have killed, robbed, and enslaved other men to build their own empires. It's making me want to cry for some reason. Even today, man kills by the millions, condoning his killing as necessary for his self-preservation. He is now but reaping the seed of his sowing. He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. No man can hurt another man without condemning himself to greater hurt. Fear dominates the world today. While fear is in the world, love cannot also be. Love can never dominate the world until man ceases to live in a primarily sensed existence and knows the light of the spirit within him. This new age brings man one step nearer to the universe of greater knowing through greater comprehension of man's relation to man and to God. Each past cycle in the growth of man toward higher levels has been illumined by the few inspired messengers of the light who have known God in themselves. New inspired messengers who know God in themselves will likewise give the light to this new cycle. And these few messengers of the light must multiply into legions, for the need of a spiritual awakening is great. Man's whole reason for being is to gradually pass through his millions of years of physical sensing into his ultimate goal of spiritual knowing. Man has now reached a transition point in his unfolding where he must have that knowing. He can acquire that knowing only through greater awareness of the light of the universal self, which centers him as one with God. And then we have a diagram if anyone wants to look at it.
And the diagram is the beginning of part 2.
That gave me all the feels.
Yeah. Here, I've put the diagram up in case anyone wants to see it who doesn't have the book open.
I'm thinking the diagram is referring to something we're going to be introduced to in part 2. BJ made a good point. I didn't realize it said part 2 up above it.
Well, I think it's great to, either way, I think it's great to see visual. I'm such a visual learner. It's one of the reasons I love this book so much is because there are so many drawings that help to unpack the concepts that he talks about in words. It's very helpful to my mind.
Yeah. And he
Well-
physically drew these.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. That is Walter Russell's drawing. It's pretty,
Without
right?
getting into it too much,
It's pretty.
the double spiral is one of the most ancient symbols on Earth. Like a simple spiral is one, and the double spiral is another one. And it's literally one of the oldest pieces of art on the planet. And I have been geeking out to that for my entire life. I've been drawn to it. And I remember seeing that on the internet years ago and just like, but it wasn't connected to anything. I didn't know where it was from or what it had to do with. And I was like, save image. I have no idea what this is, but I'm geeking out on it, you know? And it was, I have an entire file folder on spiral and double spiral and various Wikipedia articles, not even getting into the Fibonacci spiral, but just like it goes on and on for me. It's like a strange obsession.
Cool.
So
That's awesome. That's exciting. I would love to see some of your favorites as we go into the visual part in part 3. I would love to invite anyone to share images that correspond to what we're studying. And you're in for such a treat, Nia, because that double spiral is the key. I mean, it's the key to creation. So we're going to get all into that.
oh yeah, everything in the universe is a spiral and or double spiral, and it just goes on and on. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm super mega geeked on that.
I'm playing with Victor.
I know, right away. Hey, buddy.
Hi, Victor. We like you.
I didn't do this.
How do you do that?
Oh, you do it like this.
Look at his face.
Thumbs up for Victor.
Good to see you.
We finished reading section. Wait, what's it called? Part 1.
Part 1. Yeah.
Wow.
So there was the discussion on the thread about, Rachel, you brought up like, wait a second, 3,000 years, wasn't it? Like 3,000 years, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I definitely have that. I had that same question. Every time I read that, I have the same question. But then here in chapter 17, when he says man's new cycle, he's obviously talking about harvest.
Hmm.
Like he's obviously talking about the shift from third to fourth density. Like it's just so, I don't know, from my perspective, it seems very, like he senses, and he doesn't use the same story or the same language, but he senses the ending of third density and the need to evolve into the next epoch. This coming age will mark an epochal advancement in man's evolution towards his goal of omniscience and omnipotence. I mean, seems clear as day to me. He's sensed the pending transition from third to fourth. He doesn't talk about it that way, but seems like that's what this is.
My only caveat to that, though, is that mystics have been referring to the astrological ages for eons in the same regard. And they have been discussing the, you know, even the song, was it Jefferson Airplane or something, from like the age of Aquarius, you know, and it's like
Yeah,
we're
not
moving
Jefferson Airplane,
into
but
from
who was that?
it's somebody anyway, but
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like the
Mhm.
whole, we've been moving from the Piscean age, which was all about, you know, we can look at the very, what they considered solar and very spear and war and patriarchal male yang, just war energy, into this age of Aquarius, which is more that, just a huge shift into, I'm not an astrologer, but so take that with a grain of salt too, but moving into a more spiritually open age, into a more mindful, aware, conscious, yin, receptive, connected, and they've been talking about that for thousands of years too. So I think they aren't necessarily separate. To me, that they combine and make it all weaves together and makes perfect sense.
Yep. Well, and there's the, you know, there's the Western system of astrology. There's also the Eastern system of astrology, you know, systems, I should say. There's lots of them. But of course, I'm sure you all know about the Vedic calendar, you know, and the yugas and the ages of consciousness and the ebbs and flows of, you know, higher and lower consciousnesses. And yeah, and then there's the Mayan calendar and how it tracks the ages and epochs of consciousness. So there's lots of systems out there, and they don't all, you know, they don't all overlay one-to-one in terms of what they point to, but it seems pretty clear that they're all pointing to the same process that we're going through. And so, you know, and for me, I don't know if I've said this already, but Ra is my touchstone. Like I trust Ra's teachings more than any other teachings on earth because of the nature of the work, where Ra is transmitting from, and, you know, the advantage that gives Ra in terms of knowing things and being able to teach them. So I kind of put everything through that filter, which isn't to say that I just trust everything Ra says without any critical eye, but you know, I kind of synthesize as I read. Hint.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that 25,000 years cycle that Rob speaks about. It's pretty close to a full turn of the zodiac.
Yeah.
Each sign, we go through each sign of the zodiac in about 2,000 years. So 12 signs, that adds up to 24,000 years, which is pretty close to the 25,000 years. So
I had thought that the one cycle through the zodiac is the same thing as a precession of the equinoxes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's actually closer. It's much closer to 26,000 years than 25,000 years.
Right. Yeah.
Astrologically, as they calculated, it's more like 25,800 years or something like that. So, but yeah, I do think that's Ross. I mean, I can't imagine that's different than when Ross says a major cycle of 25,000 years. I can't imagine that they're not talking about one cycle through the houses like you're talking about.
Precession. Yeah. Right.
Precession.
Well, and then like you said, who's they that we're referring to? The Vedic or the Western and the Eastern? They all had like depending, it was like, I think between 2,200 and 3,000 years or something like that. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but there was, depending on which one you looked at, there's a variation. So you go to add those up, and it's within summary range. And you know, Ra even said that he's got issue with time and numbers, and so it all, to me, it all makes sense and corresponds. And the, you know, we can, that's just our left brain going crunching numbers, which is the exact here. Which are we pulling? You know, we're doing that again, where it's like, stir the pot. Okay, we're all within summarized. You know, I'm teaching my 8-year-old how to round. You know,
Mhm.
I'm
Right.
like, you know, it's 8 o'clock. No, it's 7:55, mommy. You know, I'm like, oh, we're rounding here. Stir it up.
It's also possible that throughout the ages and throughout parts of the world that our system for telling time is different or has changed over time, and that kind of has muddled the pot a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's useful to just look at patterns and trends and be able to do the kind of rounding process of synthesis, you know, like get the gist and get the sort of sense of what's being, you know, what we're being talked about, rather than try to like identify which is the 100% authoritative number, or, you know, whatever, who's telling of this trend is the most accurate.
And then there's the remembrance that motion is an illusion and there's only stillness. And we're just perceiving the equinoxes and all of that.
Good one.
Literally, evolution happens through our perception of it, not through any other way. We appear to be evolving. That's the creator's harvest.
Yeah. There are a lot
One
of,
of my
go ahead, BJ.
one of my favorite things that I've heard Byron Katie say, which might be, that's a lot, that's saying a lot. But she said one time, I realized it's something like this, may not be an exact quote, but I realized at one point that I didn't want to speak, and then I never had to speak again, and I have never spoken since, or something like that. And she spoke those words, right? Or it seemed as though she spoke those words. But when I heard that, it was a transmission, because it really felt like, and I don't know whether it was just my experience, but it felt like her words were coming from stillness. You know, her words were coming from not speaking. Like she realized that she could never speak. You know, she had the option to never speak again, and that she wanted to never speak again, and she never spoke again. Anyway, it just was like, I get that. Yeah.
That makes me think of a lot of those spiritual teachers who's, when they're teaching, they seem to be channeling from a place of stillness and not from themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my verbiage around that sinks in for me, that feels good, like has a feeling that feels good, is intuiting. I can, or you can, they're transmitting, or I like to feel like I get this welling up from the center line, from the core, and it like kind of balloons out, or like feels like water where it comes up from the center line, and that's intuiting some like transmitting. And that might, I love what you said about that, BJ. That makes a lot of sense outside the senses. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me too, Nia, about intuiting, because I think Rod talks about the two modes of intelligence, the rational and the intuitive. And the rational is like crunching data, essentially. It's really sensory based and information based. And intuitive is reaching into the subconscious mind and reaching in towards knowing, and reaching towards, you know, the invisible, and yeah, getting in touch with that part of the universe.
Or like Ra was talking about the everlasting rock and
Mm-hmm.
thinking it into form, and that third density can't possibly understand and do that, but yet when we're still individual yet higher density, that will be so connected to the all that we can think rock into shape and form, because we're all particles or non-particles are as connected. Yeah, love it.
Mm-hmm.
You should write a song about that.
It sounds fun.
Thinking things into shapes because we're all so connected.
You start. We'll each add a line. You know, we'll each throw in, and then we can work on the chorus together.
I like it.
Well, what occurs to me too is we could start it off by going, "This is the dawning of the," and then we go, "Thinking things into form," or something like that. TOTOH Collective music video.
Mhm.
I want that. I think that should be the workshop at the next fourth density Saturday.
I
Oh
was
my
just
gosh.
thinking that we need to record a
amazing.
flash mob version of this at 4DS. We'll add the song later. We just need to throw in some line dancing routines and whatever we know, flash dance or whatever. Then we'll work on the song and add it later.
Future students of The Secret of Light who watch this video are really going to appreciate this portion of the talk.
I was thinking that too. I think this demonstrates how much we're accessing the material.
Yeah.
Not in a scholarly way, but in a like, oh yeah, we're connected. We're grokking this. Joy, evidence of understanding or something like that.
Sounds fun. I want to make one more comment, or maybe it'll be the last comment. We don't know. We got 5 minutes. We can probably get a few more in, but one of the teachers that BJ and I both follow, we've mentioned him before. His name is Rupert Spira, and he uses an analogy and a metaphor for teaching that he returns to again and again about dreaming. And so he'll guide people through, you know, basically a guided meditation or just a thought experiment using the metaphor of a dream. And it's such an effective teaching tool. And it comes to mind in our reading today when Walter Russell talks about the illusion and the senses deceive, and there is actually no motion and nothing's actually happening. It's so hard to grok that from a waking state when we're inundated by so much data that contradicts everything he's saying about that. But when I think about the metaphor of the dream and the idea that this is all just God dreaming, we're all just inside of, this universal infinite mind dreaming all of its, all the portions of its infinite thought. And I'm not doing a very good job of talking about it. It would help if we all had the same shared context of listening to Rupert Spira talk about dreams. But when I think about that, it's like, okay, yeah, from that context, I can kind of resolve the paradoxes when he talks about, it's actually nothing's happening. There's no motion. There's no, like bodies don't live and die and all the things that he talks about that just seem like, wait, what? But from the perspective of imagining that it's all just happening inside of the mind of one infinite being, it's like, okay, yeah. Anyway, I don't know if that lands because it's out of context, but the metaphor of the dream has been one of the ways that I try to okay, I think I can kind of start wrapping my knowing around that.
It
I can
does,
look
that makes
for-
sense.
I can look for one of those videos where he's using that metaphor.
Oh, that'd be awesome. And then share it to the group.
Perfect.
I would love that. That'd be so wonderful. BJ, thank you.
Please, yeah. That actually, what you're saying, Aaron, it reminds me, I keep using the same verbiage for this, it makes sense for my mind and for my senses to be so zoomed out. In the meditation, we talk about things falling away or dropping away or moving things or coming to center with things, but for me, it's almost like zooming out, pulling out so far. And then there's no duality at that level. There's no, back to the law of one, we're pulling out and being part of the one infinite creator experiencing itself. The verbiage experiencing itself has kind of slams me back into my senses. We're experiencing physical feeling and sensation within the five senses of the body, and then even more so with the energy bodies, and then just what we were talking about before, there's all these in the pot. But saying that we are the creator experiencing itself, for whatever reason, the word experience takes that, when I'm floating and zoomed out non-dualistic perspective, it slams me back in. And I like the dream analogy. That feels softer. It feels more expansive. It feels more out of body than in body. It less rational and more creative experiential without experiencing it. So I'm already jiving on that. I like that a lot.
Cool. Nice.
Are you raising your hand, Rachel?
Okay, so Diana and then Rachel.
Rachel was first.
Oh, Rachel, then Diana.
Yeah, we're cutting it close. I'll be quick. Aaron, what you were describing was reminded me of this movie called Waking Life. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's from back in the day. I don't know. It's definitely at least 15 years old, maybe even more. But there's a part in that movie where the character's having a lucid dream, or you really don't know if he's dreaming or if he's dead the whole time, but he goes around asking people, what is it like to be a character in a dream? And during later on, a few years after I've watched that movie a ton of times in my younger days, but I used to have lucid dreams very often. And the thing that I would do was either, number one, I would always try to go into the sun. And I don't know why, it was before I knew about the raw material, but I would find the sun and I would try to get into the sun. And then there would be something that would push me down, like, no. And then I would just walk around and I would ask people, what is it like to be a character in a dream? And but that reminded me of that. But Naya, what you say about experiencing, bringing it down, to tie it back into the Secret of Light material that we just read, is the sensing being an illusion. It's still kind of the creator doing it. So it's like the sensing's not real and sensing's deceptive, and also the creator's the one that's sensing through us, or because we are the creator, or in the mind of the creator. And one prayer that I have, it's kind of like my mindfulness prayer when I want to sit and be really present with something, is I will ask, like, I like, let the fullness of the experience be given to the creator. And then I just try my best to fill in. I kind of do become enmeshed in the senses in a way, but with the intention on giving that as a gift to the creator. So both of you had wonderful things to say that brought up a lot for me. Thank you.
That is huge. Thank
That's
you for
beautiful.
that.
Mhm.
That is beautiful, and I'm gonna take that in. That feels important, and I need to remember that. Thank you for that, Rachel.
What was the name of the movie? Waking
Waking Life.
Oh, it's so
Waking Life.
good.
Waking
Yeah.
Life. Okay.
Highly
I'll,
recommended.
I'll type it
Yeah.
in Telegram.
Cool.
Okay.
Diane, do you want to say something before we go?
Oh, I think that's a really beautiful, warm note to end on. I was going to express something really like theoretical and
Oh.
cosmological, but I like what you just said.
Mm.
I feel good.
I also
Maybe you
like
could
your,
share it in the Telegram chat, Diana. I
don't
still want to
want
hear it.
Too
I know
much
we're over
typing.
time, but I'm like, I still want to hear it if you could type it up.
I'll quickly say that what you said, Nia, about how thinking of the one infinite creator by that name slams you back into the sense world and into the world of multiplicity and duality. Because when you think of something having experience, you think of those qualities, right? Am I understanding you properly there? And how there's this undistorted unity that somehow is beyond experience. I've heard Bentinho Massaro, and maybe he got this from like Ramana Maharishi or something, but like that the one is neither experiences nor does not experience. There's something beyond the realm of experience. The realm of experience somehow fits squarely into the distortion, the illusion that there can be a thing having an experience and that which is experience. And that is the ultimate paradox, right? It's just like irreconcilable. But I do think that the version of the creator that is having experience is the version of the creator that is able to be aware and distort itself into is able to distort itself into illusory parts. So like all I want to say is when you talk about the one infinite creator, and that makes you go, oh God, how can that be unity? If experience is in the realm of division and illusion, well, there is something beyond what we call the one infinite creator that is like its ultimate primordial version, that is where all of that is resolved. And it has the same name, unfortunately, because that's what Ra gave it. But they tried. And, I like to think that it's real. So maybe you can have another name for that. That's my share in a nutshell.
Thank you.
I think it's the paradox again. Who mentioned the paradox earlier? Was that Aaron or Diana?
I think
Somebody
BJ.
mentioned the paradox. Yeah,
I think we did at one point.
yeah, BJ. Okay.
The
BJ.
creator mentioned it, I think.
Yeah, right. Through BJ, right?
Well, I want to just pull a little rank here, and as the facilitator, I'm going to take the last comment because I want to say that, oh my gosh, what a juicy session. Thank you all so much. And ultimately what we're studying here, this is what I think. There's so much we can get out of this material, but I think if we stick with it, what we're going to discover is that the one infinite creator had to create some strategy to give itself the context to have experience. Because the one infinite creator is undivided. It has no separation from itself. It has no distance to experience anything outside of itself. So it had to invent something. And what it invented can be described, it can be drawn, it can be understood as a series of ratios and geometries and configurations of light. And that's what we're studying. We're studying the thing that the creator made in order to have the experience of this. And it's so cool. It's such a fascinating, amazing, deep thing that we're gonna continue to get into and unfold. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being along for the ride. Thank you so much for all your insights and your questions and your beautiful hearts and minds. I appreciate you all so much. This was really fun.
Thank you all. Thank you, Aaron and BJ and everyone for being here.
It's nice to see you so excited too, Aaron. That's fun.
Yeah.
We had like
Thank you,
a
everybody.
spirit of like party. We didn't have a study group. We had a party.
Yeah,
Mm.
I loved it. This
Yeah,
was
this feels like you said, juicy, but it's like a recharge for me because I had to admit I was struggling a little bit with it's not dry, but like, I don't know, there was just something off about it for me that wasn't settling and sinking in the same way. And I feel so much better and different about it now. And
Cool.
I have y'all to thank for that. So
Nice. Stick with it. Stick with it. Let's keep going. Love you all.
Bye.
love y'all. Bye.
Love y'all.
feel
Bye.
better, Rachel.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.